Thank you all for gathering. And yes, I'm speaking from way down near Antarctica. My head and heart are with everyone in the USA, and I'm certainly waiting for when I can return there, especially to Penn State, where I've spoken quite a few times. The current situation, with all its tragedy, actually has great potential for personal and societal transformation. Let's face it, the pandemic has upended the present. But it's given us a chance to remake the future. How are we going to choose to march ahead, individually and collectively, for the future? You see, ordinarily it's not so easy to change. It's not so convenient to change course. But in these present circumstances, change is easier to make. I like to point out that there's an old Chinese proverb which many people think is a blessing, but actually it's a curse in disguise. But my point will be that we'll take it as a blessing. That old proverb goes like this: may you live in interesting times. So when you hear that, you say, well, sure, yes. I'd love to live in interesting times. But originally, this proverb was meant as a curse. It's a polite way of saying, may you have a hellish existence. We certainly live in interesting times, and you all are coming of age in a very tumultuous period for the world. As you know, there are so many interlocking crises. Usually human beings are accustomed to dealing with one crisis at a time. But now you have several heavyweights converging all at once. The health crisis caused by the pandemic, the environmental crisis caused by human beings and their extractive economies. You've got nuclear weapons still waiting and ready. And then there is the internal crisis, meaning our psychological state, becoming so stressed, so overburdened with anxiety. It's still possible in these circumstances to get great benefit. You see, just as your concept of happiness changes along with your body, similarly, your ability to respond to circumstances usually changes in terms of your age. That means body transformation. Just think, the concept of enjoyment that you had when you were a child changed because your body changed. I don't think any of you are playing with toy trucks and toy dolls or whatever we did when we were children. Why is that? It's because your body changed. You were proceeding merrily, more or less, as a child. And then when you were 12 or 13, what happened? Bang! The hormones hit you hard, and suddenly you saw the world differently. Your body changed, and your your body changed, and your concept of happiness changed. And so it looks like the concept of happiness you have now will be that way all your life. No. Your body is still changing. It's gone from childhood to youth to young adulthood, and then comes older adulthood, and if you live a full life, old age, and then closure. When you're in your 20s and 30s, and this is very important to understand because the yoga wisdom teaches us how your conception of happiness changes because your conception of happiness is dependent on the body, and the body is changing. So when you're in your 20s and 30s, the main emphasis, psychologists will tell us, the main emphasis is on unique, awesome experiences. What do you think? You want something that's unprecedented, something original, something that stand out, a mega moment. That's what it's all about when you're in your late teens, your 20s, your early 30s. And you think life is always going to be like that. I want defining experiences, peak moments, magic moments. Awesome, you know the word. But guess what? By the time you get into your 60s and 70s, psychologists say, your conception of happiness and satisfaction changes. Instead of your striving for those magic moments, those unique, awesome experiences, you become so focused on just the ordinary things in life. It sounds horrible, I know, doesn't it? You're thinking, oh my God, is this what it's going to be like when I get old, you know? Just being satisfied watching the kids play in the playground and watch the leaves turn colors, and oh no. But factually speaking, that's what will happen. The whole emphasis on the awesome magic moments fades. And you just take your good days as just the routine. Now, is there something beyond both of those phases? The awesome phase when you're in your late teens, 20s, and 30s, and the routine phase when you're in your 60s and 70s. Is there something beyond that? Yes. The Bhakti Yoga texts teach us that there is happiness and satisfaction beyond physiology and psychology, beyond the body and mind. But generally we don't try to access that kind of experience. We don't know anything about it, or we doubt that we could ever attain it. And meanwhile, we've got some good stuff that's right out there waiting for us to grab, right? I mean, when you think about enlightenment, self-realization, beyond the material, it sounds interesting to many people. Sounds kind of intriguing, but meanwhile, there's some good stuff to get your hands on right now, right? And, you don't want to miss out. Often people from India will tell you that Yes, they tell me, Swami, we support the need for self-realization and enlightenment, but this is something you do when you're in your 70s. So at least they accept that at some point in life you should be thinking about these things. But they say, when you're 70 years old, then you start thinking, who am I? What is my higher mission in life? But when you're younger, that is the time for making money. That is the time for the pleasures of the body. It's very difficult to get out of that groove. We're trapped by our physical conditioning, the hormones, our mental conditioning. Just think of all the stuff that's been downloaded into your mind since birth. It comes through your ears. If you want to be happy, you'll do like this. Successful people do like that. Good times are this. Happy times are that. You take all that through your ear, and these conceptions load up into your mind and drive you onward. So it's a lot of baggage, isn't it? So much has been downloaded into us, forming what we think is our self. And our conceptions of happiness and success. To separate yourself from all that is very difficult. Maybe some of you have tried to kind of just sort yourself out. You went somewhere alone, maybe for a walk in nature, or just stayed in your room alone for 3 days, and you just tried to think your way through things. Like, who am I actually, and why am I doing what I'm doing? Who told me I should do these things? Who downloaded all this into my mind? But you tried to do that, and then you notice it's not so easy at all to get beyond all that. It's what we identify with. And even if we know that we've been subject to so much external influence, still it's very difficult to extricate what is the real me. My point is that the times we're in now are a great opportunity. The tumult, which is causing tragedy without a doubt, the tumult is also giving us incentive to rethink our future, our individual future, and our collective societal future. Normally, that's not so easy to do. Maybe the last time in the USA where en masse so many persons were thinking like that was the 60s, when everything turned upside down. That was probably the last time. Before that, World War II shook up a lot is it 50 or 70 million persons dead, most of them civilians. Did you know? I'll point out an interesting fact. One Catholic bishop told me. He said before World War II, right before World War II, if you wanted to be a monk or a nun, sounds strange, doesn't it? Especially a nun. Oh my God. If you wanted to be a monk or a nun, you had to go on a waiting list, because young people were thinking, we just had World War I, and here we are on the verge of World War II. What kind of world is this? I'm opting out. I want to be. I want to withdraw from all this. It's So that was right before World War II. And then right after World War II ended, there was a huge boom again in persons wanting to be monks and nuns. Again, the Catholic Church had a waiting list that was so long. If you wanted to enter a monastery, sounds like a strange word. A nunnery sounds even stranger. A waiting list, can you believe that? So things proceeded like that a little into the 50s and then leveled out. And then by the time the 60s came, this Catholic bishop was telling me they were finished. The 60s finished off the whole fascination with becoming a monk or a nun, and everything went. You've heard what the 60s were like. But that was the last time when in American society you really had incentive happening all around you to think, why am I doing what I'm doing? Is there an alternative? But those times are now with us again. You could look at the world that's coming upon us as new and scary. You can look at the situation and see that human development as it's going on now is an extraordinary negative influence on the planet. Not simply environmentally, but also in terms of our health. There's a backlash from nature. Wildfires, hurricanes, and pandemics. Why should this be the last pandemic? I was speaking to an audience in Los Angeles, University of California students from various universities of California. And I said, you want to know how proud human beings can be? Here's an example. In 1967, the U.S. Surgeon General announced that human beings have reached the end of the phase of infectious diseases. Official proclamation. We've solved the whole issue, the whole problem of infectious diseases. The pride didn't end there. Guess what? At the same time, the prestigious medical schools at Harvard and Yale shut down their infectious disease departments.
Okay.
Shut down their infectious disease departments because there weren't going to be any more infectious diseases. Now, what's happening? What are our human beings, our fellow human beings doing? 75% of the emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic in origin. That means they've jumped from animals. 75%. Because human beings are not associating with animals in the proper way. We're invading their habitats. We're slaughtering them in factory farm conditions. They're live animal markets. All kinds of actually bizarre behavior that's bringing human beings into contact with pathogens that normally they shouldn't. So we're being kicked in this way. We're like a football now, being kicked that way, up, down, all around. It's a dangerous moment, but during such times, these interesting times, we can shape and alter our life in a different way. We've got incentive. Often when I'm speaking to students, I chime in to what I know so many are thinking. Why is the world falling apart just when I am becoming of age? Why couldn't it have waited another 50 years till I'm old and gray? Why now? It's almost not fair. Why is the party over now? I just showed up. What are we going to do about it? The party is ending. Can we start an after party? Something. But these times have great advantages. We've already accepted so many changes in our life. We're isolating ourselves. We're wearing masks. We're doing so much online, school, work, online. What about some deep internal changes? Are we going to go on business as usual? Or is it a time for some deep inner work, some spiritual transformation? This is why the wisdom texts of the Bhakti Yoga tradition are so important. They're saying, hey, you may call yourself modern, postmodern, or post-postmodern, but it's time for some pre-modern wisdom. How are we going to solve human problems when we have no technology for transforming human consciousness? The Bhakti Yoga texts explain to us that it is polluted consciousness that's causing all the problems. You may clean the environment. You may stop this pathogen or that pathogen. You may even get rid of all the nuclear weapons in the world, all 16,000 of them. But unless you have a methodology for purifying consciousness, the same problems will reappear. So the Bhakti Yogi, taking that ancient wisdom, knows how to have an applied spiritual technology. A technology that's meant for consciousness purification and transformation. That task of dealing with our own consciousness and purifying it begins with our understanding that we are different from the body and mind. So many of our current problems can be traced to human beings misidentifying the body and mind as the self. So the first step in self-realization is to acknowledge that I'm wearing the body and mind just like I'm wearing clothes. I'm wearing this, you're wearing something else, but none of us would say that I am this shawl, or you are your sweater, or you are your whatever top you're wearing. It's not you. What is the lifestyle that will allow us to experience this wisdom? We just don't want religious belief. We want non-material experience. And that non-material experience leads us to going in a different direction with our life. And certainly, we need human beings to march in a different direction. So the current pandemic is highlighting our choices, our options. The world is no longer, if it ever was, a rosy place. It's a problematic situation caused by human beings themselves. Obviously, human beings don't know what to do with themselves. Will human beings come together and solve these planetary problems? Planetary health problems, planetary environmental problems, planetary nuclear weapons problems? Or will our massive blanket of ignorance keep us from rising to a higher level? These are questions that the yogi considers. Now, when I say yogi, I don't simply mean someone who's doing physical postures. That's great for your health. I do it myself. But Krishna in the prime Bhakti Yoga text Bhagavad Gita will explain that a yogi is one who uses his or her mind, body, and senses for purifying the consciousness. And that a yogi is someone who uses those tools, body, mind, and senses, according to a predetermined plan. How to have a lifestyle that indeed brings about non-material experience. So that's the purpose of the non-material wisdom. It's to give you non-material experience. So therefore, the mantra, the sound vibration, particularly the Krishna mantra, is for escorting you into the bhakti laboratory, the laboratory of non-material experience. Otherwise, what's the use? The world is full of religious beliefs. You may believe this way, I believe that way, but am I this body? Am I the mind? If I'm a conscious entity, where does the consciousness come from? Materialistic researchers say consciousness must emanate from the brain. Why? Because it has to. There's nothing non-material in existence. Everything has a material explanation. But just that statement is one of faith. It's a religious statement. I believe that there's only matter and everything comes from matter. Can you prove it? No. Can you demonstrate empirically how consciousness emanates from the brain? No. But it has to do that. It has to be that. Otherwise, we're in trouble. We're at risk of spooky spiritual conceptions. But human beings right now need, more than ever, a different conception, a different understanding. And then their lifestyle will change. Without lifestyle change, you're going to see no marked difference in what human beings are doing. Lifestyle change means that taking advantage of the present circumstances, I can steer my life in a different direction and have different goals. This doesn't mean you give up your studies. This doesn't mean you don't work. But what it does mean is something else is at the core of your life. So the genuine yogi and meditator is seeking the ultimate connection, the love supreme. And by connecting in that ultimate way, your life experiences change because you're not dealing with people anymore in a materialistic way. You're not treating them as if they're simply the body and mind. You don't identify persons according to their body and mind. You know it's just a covering. Therefore, you don't exploit them materially because you know they're not material. And more than that, the genuine bhakti yogi learns how to relate to others so that you're always stimulating their spiritual progress, their non-material transformation. So this is real love. Now sometimes people say that, well, Swami, what you're saying sounds great, but practically speaking, the world has so many problems now. Shouldn't we focus directly on the problems? Economic problems, inequality, environmental problems, climate change, health problems, pandemics. But you see, by focusing on your consciousness, you've gotten to the root of the situation. It is polluted consciousness that brings about environmental destruction, unnecessary eating habits, exploitation of other living entities, the spending of vast sums of money on nuclear weapons. All this because of consciousness. Conscious human beings are causing this havoc. So we are dealing with the direct practicalities, but we're doing that in the most appropriate way. Sometimes it's said that maybe human beings need to relocate to another planet. The late Stephen Hawking said that. He said that's the solution, that's the only solution. Human beings have to go populate another planet. But guess what will happen if that ever was the case? What do you think would happen? They would just trash that planet too, because you're bringing the same consciousness wherever you go. So it is practical to focus on consciousness transformation. So this ugly pandemic has created a possibility for optimism, change, and reform. It's opened a path to a new world. And it's up to us to seize the opportunity or waste it. There's one Nobel Prize winning economist, Paul Romer, now at New York University, I believe. He coined a very appropriate slogan. A crisis is a terrible thing to waste. A crisis is a terrible thing to waste. Because amidst such pressures and tumultuous situations, you are more likely to change. You're more likely to question yourself and the direction you're going in. So let's take advantage of this present situation to reevaluate ourselves. Am I this body? Am I this mind? Or do I have a non-material core self that I need to address? Because if I'm not material, how can I be materially happy? That's a subject for another discussion. Non-material happiness and the illusion of sustainable material happiness. Sustainable material happiness, I'll just briefly mention, it's not going to happen. Because by definition, material happiness is not sustainable. And this is the agony that eats away at the heart. I can't find satisfaction, fulfillment, and pleasure that endures. Therefore, we become so frustrated. And that frustration turns to anger, and we take out that anger on other persons, other groups, other nations, other creatures. So again, the Bhakti Yoga wisdom is focusing directly on how to solve human problems, and doing so in the most practical way. During my studies at Yale, I had an ambition to solve all human problems. And so my academic advisors allowed me to study whatever I wanted. They said, this approach is what the university is actually meant for. So they said, you study whatever you like. You don't have to worry about your future money. You'll have a Yale degree. So look for the solution to all human problems. And then they kind of winked and said, and if you happen to find it out, come back and let us know. Meaning you're not going to find it. And indeed, after studying this, studying that, upon graduation, I realized there is no material solution. But still, I wanted to solve problems of human existence. I didn't want to just stick my head in the sand or hide out in the forest or on the top of a mountain. So this is why I became attracted to the Bhakti Yoga wisdom. I saw that we need to focus on the real culprit, that is the human consciousness. But unless we know what actually is our identity, we're just missing the point. It's like there's a burglar who's burgled someone's house and gone away, and you see his or her footprints in the ground, and you grab the footprints thinking, I got the culprit. Similarly, by just focusing on the body and mind, we've missed the real perpetrator, which is the non-material self that inhabits the body and mind and goes from one body and mind to another, life after life. So this is some of the beginning wisdom that Krishna gives in Bhagavad Gita, and I heartily encourage you all to access that wisdom and feel some motivation to use the present circumstances in an auspicious way. It's easy to change course now. No one will criticize you for doing that. Oh, what is this? What are you doing with your life? You're living in such plenitude. You're living in such consumptive delight. Everything is rosy, and here you are trying to do some spiritual development, some non-material realization. It's very unlikely people will say that now. Everything is up for question. So why not focus on the big questions? So in that way, it's a great time, despite the tragedy. It's a great time for remaking our future, for reimagining the entire human project. That's exciting. And you can play a role in that. Okay, maybe we have some questions.
Thank you very much, Devamrita Swami. Really appreciated your points about how we need pre-modern wisdom, and I thank you for representing that for us so nicely. We will take some questions. I'm going to shamelessly give preference to my friends who are sitting right here next to me, and then afterwards we can just try to unmute ourselves and ask a question.
All right. Swami, thank you for being here with us today. I think I'm speaking for everybody. And my question to you is, there are 1 in 10 Americans on an antidepressant of some sort. And in your book, Hiding an Unnatural Happiness, got it right here. You say that there's a Western philosophy that someone's mental state, someone's happiness comes 50% from their genetics, like it's set in stone. And these people taking the antidepressants, they believe that their brain has some sort of chemical imbalance. So do you believe that happiness is a fixed thing, it's given at birth, or do you believe it's completely variable, completely up in the air?
What you were reading in my book is a predominant theory that 50% of your happiness can be attributed to your genetic makeup, like your weight. Some people, no matter what they do, many people, no matter what they do, they can't lose the weight they want to lose or gain the weight they want to gain. They always seem to go back to a set point. So 50%, according to that theory, it's not my theory, 50% is of your happiness is in accord with your genetic makeup. And then there's another 10%, they say, that is tied up with your circumstances, which are difficult to change. Your material, external circumstances, you just can't change overnight. Where you live, your job, your marriage, you can change, but it's an ordeal. So that's 60%. So they say that you have a 40% window of opportunity. How you handle what life throws at you. So 60% is more or less a done deal. Very difficult to alter. But 40% is your window of opportunity. But what Krishna explains in the prime Bhakti Yoga text Bhagavad Gita is that because you're not material, you have a 100% window of opportunity. As long as you're on the material plane with a material consciousness, you are restricted by your genetic makeup, by your body, by your circumstances. But you are not that. The non-material self is beyond all that. So therefore, the real opportunity to make genuine progress is not on the material plane, although we have to deal with material affairs and material things. I've got to deal with this body, you've got to deal with your body. But that's the same as I'm dealing with this shawl, you're dealing with your sweater. I have my circumstances. It's 75 degrees right now in New Zealand. You've got your circumstances. But those are always changing. They're external. Beyond all that, we have 100% opportunity for transformation. So let me be clear about that. I'm glad you picked up that point. It's not my theory, but that is the prime material theory of happiness. The 50% genetic makeup, 10% circumstances that are very difficult to change, and a 40% window of opportunity. Now, we want to go for the 100% window. Thank you. Great question.
Anybody else want to ask some questions? Please feel free to unmute yourself and give it a shot. Don't be shy.
I have a question, if you don't mind me popping in here.
Great, Drake.
Thank you so much for your words. My question was, I love the idea of changing the world through ourselves and through our own consciousness emanating outwards. I was wondering, if you don't mind me asking, when was the moment in your life that you realized that was the path for yourself? And what actions did you take to begin that process of inner transformation as a way to change the world outwardly?
Very good question, Drake. Thank you. I think a key moment for me was 1 month before I graduated, I went to see my dean of studies at Yale, and I confessed to him. I said, the way materialistic society is, I don't see how I can just dedicate myself to being a cog in the machine. I think I'd like to strive for something better and higher. He kind of looked at me, and then he just told me point blank, you are a Yale man, you will influence the world. What did he mean by that? He meant, look, you may have these alternative leanings, but we have done our job on you. You're going to be a leader of material society because that's what we want. And I was thinking, no, that's not what I want. So that was a key moment. Of course, I have been throughout the world on every habitable continent for close to 50 years now. Our host said 40 years, but actually I have to admit it's close to 50. Traveling on up and down every habitable continent of the world. So I've spent years organizing underground in the former Soviet bloc. I was so affected by the suffering of the people at that time. And again and again, it's confirmed for me that unless you change the consciousness, the political change doesn't last, the economic change doesn't last, because you're dealing with the same root problems again and again and again. The problems of polluted consciousness, human beings in illusion, thinking there's something they're not. And that's the fundamental lesson that Krishna teaches right at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita. As long as you think you are matter, everything that proceeds is a mistake. And you'll cause havoc. And we see human beings are doing that on a grand scale. They're destroying their own habitat. Did you know that human beings annually slaughter around 74 billion creatures a year to eat? 74 billion. And the average American consumes 31 animals, whole animals per year. Most of all that, globally and nationally, comes from factory farms. Horrible enterprises. So this is what human beings do when they're lost to themselves. And the result is they're causing massive problems for themselves. So we need a completely different way of looking at ourselves, at nature, at our relationships with other living entities. So finally, you may not know, but some of you may have heard, I'm very much involved with a practical project in your area, just maybe an hour away from Penn State. In Port Royal, Pennsylvania, we have a Eco Farm, which is certified organic, and it's the only certified cruelty-free dairy in the USA. No animal slaughter whatsoever. All creatures of all types, birds and cows and peacocks, and every creature is taken care of. There's no violence whatsoever on that farm. It's meant to show how human beings, other creatures, and the Supreme Consciousness can all exist together without destructive competition. So yes, that Gita Nagari Echo project is just an hour away. And as soon as travel permits, I'll return there. I usually spend significant time there twice a year, weeks at a time. But I haven't been able to come because, the virus has its plans. So I thought that would be interesting to raise that, yes, right down the road from you, we have an alternative ecological project that is meant to show how human beings can live simply and uplift their consciousness and not exploit nature, exploit other creatures, or exploit themselves. Okay?
Thank you so much.
All right, Drake. Thank you. Okay. It's been great being with you all. And let's use these present circumstances to think deeply about what our goals are, what is our identity, and what's the best way forward for our life and for others. Thank you very much.